We're back, and we're back with a simulcast this time. So this is going to be Villaincast episode 12 when it comes out. It's also going to be featuring on Josh McKinney's channel, his Untitled Jiu-Jitsu Show. Um, so this is like a joint episode that we're going to be doing together frequently, either every couple of weeks or every month at least. So definitely check out those future episodes. Me and Josh get on super well. We have very similar mindsets when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Um, and so when it comes to approaching different concepts and different ideas, we just really bounce off each other. And just prior to us recording this episode, he put out a question across his Instagram followers of technique versus concept. And I was watching it unfold, and I really wanted to jump in and add my little bit into it. So fortunately, we managed to just record over an hour of content from it. So definitely check it out. We hit a lot of satellite ideas as well around that initial question of technique versus concept. We're looking at doing future episodes as well. You hear us talk about towards the end of the episode of maybe the next one being regarding position before submission. Um, I'm really looking forward to that one. I've recently released an episode. Check out on my YouTube channel about that very subject. So to hear Josh's take on it as well. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to recording that in the next couple of weeks. But listen to this episode, give me your feedback, give me comments. Come onto the Discord channel. There'll be a link on that across all the various ways you'll find me. Yeah, have fun. Thank you.
All right, we are recording. We're good to go. Chris and I decided last time that we were on a podcast. I was on his podcast, and this one should be on both of our podcasts. We just decided, you know what, we should probably do one of these maybe once a month. I don't know if it's the same for him, but for me, it causes me to think even more deeply about what I believe in jiu-jitsu and stuff. And so it ends up being a really cool, almost a cool exercise for me. And people seem to enjoy it too. And so it's been really good. Chris, how are you doing, man?
Oh, Josh, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. We just kind of jumped into talking, and we're just kind of start at this point, I guess, and just dig right into techniques and concepts and what matters and what doesn't. But this came about for I posted a story on my Instagram, and I said, if you could only choose one, would you choose techniques or concepts? You can only choose to learn one way. And what I found really surprising is I didn't look at the exact results at the very end, but pretty much throughout the whole time that story was up, it was like 50-50. Some people said 50% of people said if they can only learn techniques, they would learn techniques. And if then 50% said if they can only learn concepts. What is your thought on that, Chris? Let's just jump into it.
Well, actually, since this is a joint podcast, I was like, is this the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show plus Villaincast? So I'm like, let's make sure we plug both of those in there.
That is true. That is true.
But yeah, I was watching your story unfold on Instagram, and the amount of like people that were coming back saying, how can you teach concept without technique, and saying they'd keep technique. Obviously, I haven't seen the full results. Like you said, it was like more 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
But I was watching the whole thing just thinking, dude, like I want to jump in. Like, let me jump in. This is this is what I was born for. I came into this world 34 years ago just for this very conversation. Like, don't leave me out of this. So if you could keep one concept or technique, like not singular, but as in if you'd had to choose one part of jiu-jitsu,
Mm-hmm.
that's like saying, like, if I was to like give you words and then just like wipe like language out of the human memory, you wouldn't have like context of why you have all these words. But if I can give you like the reason for language existing and how to create language, you could remake words. Like, you may come back up with the same words that already exist. And it's the exact same I thought with like concept and technique, is that you only get technique from concept. Like, um, no matter what happens, if you know, you will always have physics, you will always have biology. And so everything that we have in jiu-jitsu, didn't come from nothing, didn't come from some deity just like handing it down on some sort of stone tablet like 3,000 years ago. It's based on principles, it's based on concepts, it's based on scientific reasoning. um like pressure and being able to crush someone is the formula for pressure. It's mass and area um will create pressure. Like the more mass you have in a tiny area, the more pressure you create. It's science. When it comes to joint locks, it's biology. If I control above and below the one I want to destroy, I've isolated the joint and now I can put it in flexion or in a position it doesn't like. When it comes to chokes, all I need to do is find a way of putting things into your um, arteries on your neck, and eventually you will black out. I don't really care what they are. And so I think you would get very stunted and not go any further if all you had was technique. You need the concept to understand why you have the technique. And with jiu-jitsu being the chaos it is, being able to amend what you're doing on the fly by understanding what you're actually trying to accomplish, um, will make you a better grappler in general. I know I've talked a
that
lot there.
that makes sense to me, man. That makes I think too. Yeah, I loved how you put it into words. I think words and language, I think that really does make sense. But then let's say you choose to only learn technique. You get to only learn technique only,
Yeah,
out of the two choices. Your coach can only give you a very, very small amount of technique at a time. There's
yeah,
no way that you're going to be able to remember more than, especially remember and actually perform and do more than like one or two techniques a week at first, because people are generally slow learners at first when they
yeah,
start jujitsu. And so just from and that's kind of my big thing when it comes to concept versus technique, is a lot of people see really good grapplers and they say, hey, this guy really isn't, the way he teaches is not really conceptual at all. He pretty much just reacts to the situation. Yes, but he's also trained for 20 years.
yeah,
And having that, that the argument is not what will make you good at jujitsu. The argument is what will make you good at jujitsu faster and more efficiently. And so
yeah,
that's kind of why, or specifically in your situation where you didn't have a coach. If you didn't have a coach that you could just go to every class and say, hey, I'm stuck in this position, what should I do? Or I'm losing to this submission, what should I do? Without having that concept of this is what your whole thought process should be from here, it probably would have put you at a huge disadvantage if you were just deciding I am going to just find technique to answer every question that I have.
Well, I think that, I mean, Preet, whenever because obviously he shaped a lot of the way I look at concepts, is you, like you say, you hit the nail on the head there. If you try and learn two techniques a week, which is, say if your coach there shows you two techniques a week, that's going to be 8 in a month. And over the space of a year, you're now looking at 70 odd techniques in that year. How many of those 70 techniques are you going to take realistically? A fraction.
Mm-hmm.
So it is literally the equivalent of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Um, there has to be a more efficient way of doing that. I mean, as much as there's this argument that I say of concept versus technique forever, schools teach concepts. There's a reason why they both have to appear. Like, you learn in maths, you learn everything via example,
Mm-hmm.
but you then get explained like why they exist, why, how that actually works with the
Mm-hmm.
example. And so, yeah, obviously, completely, yeah, you couldn't really show concept without demonstrating a technique. But if you taught a technique without demonstrating the concept, then the whole thing's just singular. It's one and it's dead. But if I can like teach a concept and say, right, here's the technique that demonstrates this concept in action, then I think that's more in line with how education actually is in general.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why it's done that way. And then once you have an understanding of um, the underlying principles, it allows for your own problem solving. Like you get taught how to do addition or whatever in maths, and then you go out and solve your own problems. You don't have to just like go, oh, I've come across this sum before, I know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could have to learn an awful lot of sums to come across all the different instances you may need sums in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's woefully inefficient, which is pretty much how I do jiu-jitsu.
And that really is, it really is how jiu-jitsu is done. Now, I think that there is, and I'm not sure if we differ on this, I think that there is a place for, you're dealing with spider guard and you feeling like you're not able to deal with spider guard. You're getting, let's say you're not even getting submitted. Let's say you're doing well at defending it. But then you're like, man, I just can't figure out a way to get around it. That's when it is nice to have a coach that says, hey, if you build these frames, if you grab their pant legs and you extend your arms, then you can get to your concept of passing the guard, right? But until you deal with that, you're not able to. And so that's something that I always, it's a great advantage to have in your back. I mean, it's a great advantage just to have YouTube now, where you can, if there is something you're stuck with, you can just solve it. You can answer that problem, but you cannot, at least you can't efficiently build a jiu-jitsu game just saying, well, I'm having this problem, look it up. I'm having this problem, look it up. You need to apply it to your, what we would call concept, your general fight, your general idea of how you're going to deal with the position. Would you agree with that or disagree?
I think one way you look at like how you answer that, like being able to go to a coach or YouTube or something like that, is again, I seem to have settled on this idea of relating it to maths. Like, you're taught basic maths, you're taught basic examples of those maths in action, and then you operate at a certain level with your arithmetic, and eventually your arithmetic bottoms out. And what do? You go to a calculator when it's bottomed out. Like, with enough practice, you probably could get to that answer you needed. But if you're not adept enough at maths, you understand what you need to do. You understand if it's, what part of the equation needs solving, except you're just not adept enough at it to do it yourself, mentally. So you go to a calculator or you look up the answer that's already been solved, which again is where that would come in. Like, you have a calculator in the room, which is your coach, which can hopefully solve the problem. But again, it comes all the way back to you still need to understand where the problem is that you're trying to solve, and have a rough idea how to solve the problem, instead of just memorizing an infinite number of sums that you may one day need, and you already have the answer to because you memorized all the sums. I think there is definitely a reason to have a coach. It's definitely, I think, the calculator analogy. And yeah, I think it would make sense that earlier on in your career to have that, but the more you kind of practice at these maths, the more adept you'll be, the less you'll need that calculator. Which is what high belts are in general.
And to relate it to, though, the more you rely on that calculator, the more you will be in the habit of relying on that calculator. If we're saying that, if they're saying that calculator is the coach, because that's something that I used to not understand. I remember, I think the conversation, I was with one of my buddies, and he was talking about hunting versus just getting your food. And he said, if we're both fed, I'm hunting for my food and you're just getting it. And he said, but just, imagine if you got put in the situation where now you have to hunt for your food. He's like, you would have no idea how to do it. And that is, generally, for people listening, I mean, I guess maybe you plan on staying at your same school forever, maybe you will always have a coach. But most people, they move, they decide to open their own gym. They just aren't, their coach isn't as accessible. And then they're kind of useless in a sense of problem solving. And that's something that's like, I think even as coaches, that should be the enemy for our students. We should always be pushing our students to be good at learning. That's kind of like, like I always say it's kind of like by purple belt. I think I kind of expect my students to be able to progress and learn, even if I just decided for 6 months, hey, I'm not coming to the gym. You guys handle. I would expect them to be 6 months better by the time, and not that was actually evident at one point. I think legally speaking, probably shouldn't mention it, but I will. I didn't. So we were closed for like 6 weeks, I think, during the start of the pandemic, and there were like 8 guys that I had that they had asked me like, "Hey, if we all train in a group together, can we sneak into the gym and train?" And I was like, "Yeah, you guys can." And I actually didn't train that whole 6 weeks. It's like the longest I've ever taken off jujitsu. But I came back and they were all better. They had all been training different things, positional sparring, different things, problem solving what they were dealing with. And then the cool part was they even had 2 guys that were brand new that were, by the time we came back, were much better. So not only were they able to progress themselves, but they were able to help 2 white belts, and like the highest ranking guy, there was 1 purple belt, and I think everyone else was a blue belt. And so to be able to do that, I think is so important, because you're not always going to have a coach around.
Well, I like to think of it. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we want to make our students better, faster than we ever were.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea that I've already got brown belts in my gym who are a brown belt way faster than I ever got to brown belt. And that's what I want. I want to be black belts faster than I was. I want them to be better than me. But if I just create clones of me, they can't be better than me, because you'll never get better than the original. There's a lot of people out there who are very good at technique and do really well in competition. But I think the idea that competition is the be-all and end-all of jiu-jitsu is a problem in general, because not everyone wants to compete, but also it's what you want to get out of jiu-jitsu anyway, because not everyone's an athlete. That is a separate quality away from jiu-jitsu. It's jiu-jitsu plus athleticism is the sport. But for actually learning and understanding the art, it depends what you want out of jiu-jitsu. Are you happy just being, with these techniques that you have, or are you curious? Are you curious how far this goes? Because compared to like traditional martial arts, I know you did some as a kid as well, didn't you? I think it was,
I did some really basic self-defense stuff as a kid. Yeah.
That when you have, I think it was also going off the beaten track here. It's one of the reasons why I hate the idea of a syllabus in jiu-jitsu, like a curriculum at white belt or blue belt, is because you've then standardized what people have to learn. It then kind of puts a full stop on the jiu-jitsu. No one wants to explore anymore. It wasn't until like when I was doing traditional martial arts that you got to black belt, and it was kind of open to you then. Like, oh, now you can go explore and figure out more. Except I never really had the tools to go figure out more.
Yeah.
With jiu-jitsu, it's like it's so open that the amount of innovation that's happened in the just over a decade that I've been training. Like, why would I want to stunt that? There must be a reason we can innovate. There must be reasons why things work and exist. Innovate. Like, here are the tools to innovate. And I go back to the stories that you like the rumors and legends you hear of like Rickson Gracie, who is this incredible jiu-jitsu guru that no one can touch. However, the veracity of that is. But going on the idea that maybe they're true, and you can like just shut down black belts, even though he might not have seen what they're doing, like because he's doing his Rickson thing. There must be a reason he can shut them down. Like even if he's never come across the problems before, there's a reason he can solve the problems. And then I look at other high level guys and people who can then just shut down like the new stuff that happens to them there and then that they might not have come across. There must be a reason they can do that without practicing the technique before. Why?
Mm-hmm.
There must be a consciously or unconsciously part of their head that is just doing it. And I think you can't get to a high level in jiu-jitsu and not do that. It's just a natural thing that you have when you've been around the sport for a long time. The only difference is how you then give that to the lowest belts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you give it to them? Do you give them what you know, like technical wise, or do you give them the tools that you currently are that you think would actually make them have the same mindset as you do, like help them be as good a problem solver as you are? And I think out of the choices, I think I'd rather have that second one. I'd rather them be Rickson Gracie and be able to solve everything that ever comes their way than just clones of whatever technical imprint I am at that moment in time. Like if you could just like scan me in like a scanner and then just print me off there and then, like what my technical ability is. I don't want those as as students. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't. You're right. There's no way that they can be as good at exactly what you do as you are, because at a point, jiu-jitsu becomes your own body type, and your own, the certain positions. There are certain positions that I can play when passing that I'm sure a lot of my students couldn't because of I have really good hip flexibility. And so that, like then to expect some of my students to be able to do that and to say, hey, this is how you pass. This stance is how you're going to pass the guard. What'll happen is they'll be discouraged. They'll be like, it doesn't work for me. And so, but when they have that general thought process, it tends to be a big change for them.
Well, like I say, one of my favorite parts whenever I have someone new start jiu-jitsu is like saying that to them at the beginning is I do things my way. I will show you what I'm currently doing and the reasons why I'm doing them mostly. Your personality and physicality is automatically different to mine. So there's no point you doing what I am doing. I am just interested in you being a better fighter. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
How you interpret that and how you express that is yours. But I can't make you what I am. Like you have to find your own way. You have to find your own expression of this science. And an interesting one, just before everything kind of went tits up, is I had a new student start. Unfortunately, at a point where we couldn't do much else. He is 420 pounds, 6'5", 420 pounds, and I think his bench is something like 200 kilos.
Oh my gosh!
Like the guy is a monster, and as you can see, if anyone is able to view this on YouTube, I am not 420 pounds and 6'5". I'm sitting down, so you can't really tell, but I am not those things. So there is very much no point in me teaching this guy what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But with the right conceptual understandings, there's no reason he can't express jiu-jitsu and just be as good, just not the same. Especially when you have smaller guys come in and they get really frustrated with that kind of idea. It's like, I can't, do this. I'm like, we don't have to. Just express it this way. Oh, okay. And they become really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's concept allows expression. Just rote doing technique. I remember, like, especially with going back to the whole syllabus idea, like doing gradings in traditional martial arts. If you couldn't do like a certain throw for whatever reason, sorry, no belt for you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, but I can throw people in other ways really good. due to my size or whatever. But this one I just can't do. Oh well. It's like, I can't stick to those standards because some people have short ass legs. Some people have really thick necks. We can't. Jiu-jitsu isn't that one size fits all. It's a big umbrella.
I think, yeah, man, I think that that's super important. Just to shift the topic a little bit, you said this is something that I've talked about probably on my podcast before. But you said, I want to say you said subconsciously they understand the concepts, and that is something that I think is really interesting to note. Is that there are the example that comes to my mind is when Keenan Cornelius fought Leandro Lowe, maybe the third time. Keenan was playing worm guard on him, and Leandro kind of instinctively was able to knee cut through it. And afterwards, Keenan was in an interview and he said, man, this guy, he's so good at the movements that he's good at. And then he's just so in tune to what's going on that he was able to beat this guard that he had never seen before. And was able to pass it. Or maybe he was playing reverse deal or one of the millions of worm guards. I don't know. Yeah. But he was playing that and he was explaining that. And, you see people that do, if you've ever seen Leandro Lowe in an interview or seen him teach, most likely he doesn't actually understand the in-depth concept where he could verbalize it. But physically, he is able to do that. Do you think that that is something that only certain really highly coordinated people are able to do, is to kind of subconsciously understand concepts?
Well, I think again it goes back to this idea of competitive versus a coach. Like not always the best competitors make good coaches. It's your ability to verbalize what you're doing. So again, I don't think you could get to a high level in jiu-jitsu competitively or just a belt without instinctively having this in you that you can just problem solve. The difference is those who consciously do it and can verbalize it, and those who just do it, who are just like just like pluck sums out of their head without actually attempting them. Like I remember I was actually rolling with another really decent black belt. I think it's a third or fourth degree black belt. His name's Hobson Barbosa. It was at one of the Globetrotter camps, and I think I was a brown belt at the time. And I was still playing this conceptual stuff. And the second I kind of like started to throw techniques at him, he'd always cover the right gaps. He'd always like, even if I was just throwing random made up guards at the time, he was always shutting down the stuff I was doing just by doing the right thing. But there was no way on God's earth he'd ever show that. Like he could explain what he just did. Another kind of like similar story is that like the whole grilled chicken open guard that Pre kind of developed was from watching Braulio Galvao at the ADCCs and other competitions, and how like Galvao couldn't pass Braulio's guard. I'm not far from Braulio's gym. Is literally like 30 miles from where I live. And so occasionally, if they're lost, his students may end up in my gym. They do not do what Braulio does. Braulio does it, but I don't think he teaches it. So we have some of his white belts, blue belts, occasionally purple belts rock up in the gym, and they don't do it. And it's like, what the hell? I got it like third hand from YouTube / ex-Soviet Estonia, like via Pre. And how the hell are we here now with this? And you're getting it from the source, and you don't know what's happening. He could probably show the techniques that got him to that point, but his intuitive understanding of it, he just doesn't show. Yeah, then we're doing it, and they come in and they like approach our guard, and they're like, I don't know how to pass this. I'm like, it's from your coach.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that whole conversation of we put so much reverence onto people who are great competitors in jiu-jitsu. It even comes back around in circles. Like you hear people say, "Oh, Danaher never competed." Does it matter?
And and not everybody, and people will still, even though it's ignorant, question how good uh, Danaher is. And I actually, my coach was on The Ultimate Fighter in like season 12 when George St. Pierre was a coach. And so he got to train with John when John was in his 40s, but
Had
still,
hair.
yeah, he had hair. And so, and he was able to train. And my coach, Kyle, he was a brown belt at the time. And he was a really good brown belt. And he said that like he and Sean Williams would submit you like 5 or 6 times in a round, and they would start in like bottom side control, kind of slouched over, and you would try to do anything, and then they would submit you, and they would do it over and over and over again. And he's like, yeah, he's dude just as legit as anybody. He just can't train anymore. And on that note, too, I actually got to do I went to a seminar with Sean Williams. Are you familiar with Sean Williams?
Williams guard, yeah. I
Yeah,
use it.
yeah. And so I got to do a seminar of his on Saturday, just last week. It was dude is such a good teacher. Really, really, showing you stuff that you've known forever and try to do, and says, hey, this is what you're missing. This is what you're not thinking about. This is what you, and man, just his ability to explain things is just unbelievable. Is
I think especially like again, it's a weird problem that we have in jiu-jitsu of you only seen as a good coach if you're a good competitor.
Mhm.
And if you weren't a good competitor, you're only seen as a good coach if you have guys who are good competitors.
Mhm.
Except all those like marry into this real horrible problem that we have is that you can have great coaches who are in small towns because to have a great competitor, you need to have a good coach, but they need to be an athletic specimen. And if you're in a small town, the chance of an athletic specimen walking into your gym are very small.
Mhm.
But if you're in a large city, London, New York, Toronto, wherever, the chance of a specimen walking into your gym is a lot higher. So the chance of you then having a really good competitor you can just throw out the door is a lot higher. So
Mhm.
people like poo poo how good a coach is because it's just this marriage of unfortunate circumstance. You could be in a
Mhm.
small town and you never really had the athleticism to be a big competitor, yet because you don't have those things, you're not considered a good coach. But you put me in the right city and gave me a better body at birth, there was no reason I couldn't have like been those things. It's just
Mhm.
circumstance meant it didn't happen. Um, and so I think we then give too much reverence to people who are in those circumstances, who might be more mediocre coaches who didn't compete, but they're in a large city, so they just have specimens who come through the door with a bit of good technique, just go out and kill people. Or you could have really, really good competitors who now coach, yet when you actually listen to them teach, you're like, this guy doesn't actually have a clue what the fuck he is going on
Mhm.
about. Like,
And and imagine if you were to take the like 10 of the best brown belts right now. So we just took 10 of the best brown belts, and for whatever reason, they all decided they were going to leave their school, and they all came to my school. And I said, okay, guys, I found this really good sponsor. You guys don't have to work anymore. You guys, I'm gonna open the gym up for you at 11 and 7, and you guys are just going to come in and train. Okay. I'm not
yeah,
going to coach you in any way or anything. I'm just going to open up the gym. And make sure you guys are on the right steroids and whatnot. Just
yeah,
make sure you have the whole setup. And what would happen is at black belt, most likely like 2 or 3 of those guys would probably win a world championship or just be really, really good. And people would go, oh my gosh, Josh is the best coach ever. And it's really interesting that it goes simply just by creating the right environment. That would be me being considered the best coach. And that's
yeah.
kind of that is kind of the jiu-jitsu world that we live in right now.
Yeah, like again, it's like you put it correctly there. Like, not only do you have to have the right athletic specimen come in that you then put on the right track to be really curious about jiu-jitsu, but also then someone who can dedicate that much time to being that specimen, someone who can come in at like midday and stay until 10 p.m. at night, like every day, who just doesn't get injured, who just trains their ass off all day every day because they don't have to work because of whatever reason.
Mhm.
Like, how many of those do you think exist in small towns? And so, if I think if you look up to those kind of people, those athletic specimens who did really well in competition from really good backgrounds, who could afford to do these things, and whatever the marriage of fortunate circumstance is, they give them so much reverence. You do forget there are so many great coaches out there, and um, you're expecting too much. Like, you're expecting, like, you to have these same circumstances when they are very, very unique, massively unique.
That is, yeah,
Um,
just going right back to Sean Williams. He's not somebody that is in the jiu-jitsu world thought of at the same level of coach as John Danaher, right? Because John
yeah,
has Gordon and Gary Tonin and those guys. Now, I've never learned in person from John Danaher, but obviously you can buy any of his instructionals or anything like that. But Sean is one of my favorite coaches I've ever gotten to learn from. And the fact that he doesn't have any black belt world champions under him or any ADCC champions uh, does not mean that he is a bad coach, and that's I think it's a good explanation that maybe just the right guy hasn't walked into his gym,
yeah,
and that's man, that's huge. I think too we have um we do have some guys that have both. They're these physical specimens, and for whatever reason they decided, I really want to understand the intricacies and the ins and outs of of jujitsu. I think Gordon Ryan is a good example of this. Dude's a
mm,
phenomenal athlete, and his understanding of jiu-jitsu is very, very high. It's like super high level, and it shows um why he beats everyone,
mm,
and why he beats so many people effortlessly is because he's somebody that does have both.
yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. So he is a prime example of amazing circumstance in the universe. He is a athletic Adonis. He is very intelligent, and he happened to walk into a gym of a very good coach who is set up in the biggest city in the world, or one of. So,
Uh-huh.
like, wow, that was just, yeah. Of course, you're going to have a world champion in that, but um, again, then to put so much reverence on Danaher, it's like, well, yeah, well, how many students do you have come through the door that aren't Gordon Ryan? Like, how many did you have to go through to get to Gordon Ryan?
Hmm.
How many thousands of students does Henzo Gracie have before we got to Gordon? Like, like, to expect that out of your local gym and then give them shit because that hasn't happened. Like, well, who have you created? I've got 15 students. What did you want me to do? Like,
what is your thought on if you were giving advice to somebody that was coming in to do jujitsu, and their goal, like their initial thought process was, I want to be, let's say they're in your town. They come in
mhm.
and they say, I want to be a high level black belt competitor. They're 16, 17 years old. They're a really good athlete. What would be your advice that you would give them just starting out right now?
I think it'd be that realism, as in, um, of understanding the limitations of where you are, and you can change that. Like, a good example is Freddie Vosgren, who is he's like fighting on Polaris a lot these days. He's a black belt. He's originally from Germany, but he got to a certain level in Germany, and then up sticks and moved to London and went to Rickson Gracie's. And now because he's training all day, every day, and he's at a really good gym in London, he's now fighting on Polaris, and he's considered one of the up and coming talents. And that's what I'd say is like, to anyone in a small town who's got aspirations of being this good, I'd say to them, like, understand how far your coach can take you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have the resources that will allow you to get this far? Do you have the time, the money, and does your gym have the time as well to offer you? Like, if your gym's only in a community center that's only open 3 nights a week for 2 hours, are you going to be a world champion on 6 hours? They can get you a level, sure. Mm-hmm. But at that point, you have to understand that, have you overtaken your gym? As your aspirations further than what your gym can offer you, you're going to have to move. And I wouldn't be protecting of that, as in, I think that's one of the big parts of jiu-jitsu is this whole, I think we mentioned it on one podcast before, this like Japanese cultural hangover that we have in jiu-jitsu of like honor and sensei and professor and all those different terms we have.
Mm-hmm.
And crayon should not be able to go to another person's gym. Mm-hmm. It's tribal and all this. It's like, no, I'm offering the service. And if my service gets maxed out, then you as the customer need to understand that. And I'm going to say, look, I can't serve you anymore. I can serve you to this point, but you need to take your money and go find a better service that matches what you need. And for me to then hold on to you and hold you back, that would be wrong on me.
Mm-hmm.
For what reason other than weird ownership?
And I thought that was a good, the wording was good, was how far can your coach take you? Because of course there are people in small areas that have a coach that can take them farther than others, your purple belt coach that has only done self-defense based jiu-jitsu is not going to be able to take you as far as, even in the same town, take you as far as somebody who has competed at a higher level, and kind of understands what it takes. Something that is, that's something that's really important for people to kind of be honest with themselves about. I think it's tough when you are, from the area that I live in St. Louis. When I was coming up, there was nobody that was, that was doing anything. And then all of a sudden, this guy who's pretty much the epitome of the opposite of Chris Payne's, but I'm friends with both of you. But do you know who John Thomas is?
No.
So John Thomas, he's got a big YouTube following and stuff now. But he had won worlds at blue, purple, and brown. Okay. We're from the same city, super good.
Yeah.
But he is super technique, yeah. In memorizing these situations. But having that motivation of seeing a guy from my city start to do really well competitively. And we ended up training together a lot when I was like a blue and purple belt. But just getting that was such a motivating thing for me. Like, okay, well, I can push this farther. I can see how far I can go. And I think that's a really important thing that, I know for my students that kind of aspire to do that. That's really the only reason that I compete. I really don't like stay up at night loving to compete and like, man, I really just, I want to go fight. I have Murillo Santana in my division 2 weeks from now. I don't want to fight Murillo again. It was no fun the last time. But you do these things because you want to show your students like, hey, I can't we'll see how far I can make it. So then you guys will have a pretty good measuring stick, And so I think that's super important, though, for students to be honest with themselves about that.
Yeah, I think there has to be more honesty on both sides, as in an honesty from a coach. Like, you see a student who you think has great potential. You have to say, look, I can only get you this far. If you want to go further, you're going to have to go further somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But that's an honesty with yourself, as in, how far can you actually take this? How far will your dreams go? And do you see your coach being able to get you there? Which, if you have, you hear all those stories of guys who are on the, the big time, who have lived in their gym and stuff like that, and been homeless and slept on the gym floor. And it's like, do you have that? Are you that good that you think you could just like up sticks, leave everything, quit your job, go live on the gym mats and sweep for for the in return for classes?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Everyone thinks they can till they do it. And there has to be that more honesty on both sides. But it also circles around to this, the initial question of concept versus technique is kind of again the amount of reverence we put onto competition, as in that's the measuring stick of all jiu-jitsu. Not how well do you understand jiu-jitsu, it's how well did you do with it in competition.
Mm-hmm.
When competition is about the jiu-jitsu plus the athletic specimen, and if you didn't have that athletic specimen part, they ignore the jiu-jitsu part. And that seems to come back around to this whole idea of, like you said, like, people put more emphasis on the people who did well competing, and ignore more the people who didn't do well competing, despite the fact that there are two very distinct things at play: the jiu-jitsu plus the athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe the athleticism wasn't enough, so you're going to ignore the jiu-jitsu because of it. Their jiu-jitsu may be sound, but because of their body not allowing them to operate at this level that was needed, you ignore the jiu-jitsu part. And again, it goes back to the whole conversation like with Danaher. Danaher's body didn't let him compete or whatever. So those questions occasionally get asked: "Oh, is this jiu-jitsu really that good?" What? Why are those two things the same?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense.
I think that is you probably to an extent it is the difference between the sport and the art. The art is we express it in a sport, but it is still a sport. And a sport does have to do with athleticism. It also has to do with the mindset of competing. Because I have trained with some guys in the gym that I had competed with, and in competition, I was like, oh man, this guy's not very good. This guy sucks. And then I trained with them in the gym, and they are twice as good in the gym than they were in competition. And it was really, it's a really interesting thing to realize, is that like, oh, this doesn't necessarily mean world champion doesn't necessarily mean the best guy in the world, even at that weight. It means that they won a world championship. It means that they, you can kind of, but you have that, there is like the word reverence is a perfect word for it. There's just a huge reverence for
When you look
competing.
across to the other sister combat sports that we have, MMA and boxing, you name me boxing champions, UFC champions who have boxing / UFC champion coaches. Obviously, so, I was putting you on the spot a little bit, but you think, okay, so GSP, Fahad Sahabi, Greg Jackson, were they UFC champions? Not really. The guys out of AKA over in California, did they? No. Khabib's dad, was he a UFC champion or even close? No. Like, or like Freddie Roach, like one of the greatest boxing coaches, was he? Top tier boxing competitor in his prime? No. So it's like, why do we have to have that in jiu-jitsu then? When we can literally look across to those sister sports that we probably have an interest in, and they don't. Like Greg Jackson, early 2010s, late 2000s, one of the best MMA gyms.
Mm-hmm.
But Greg Jackson was never in the UFC.
No, and that's that's very interesting to think about.
Or Tiki Gomes,
Uh-huh.
one of the great striking coaches. Um, Mediocre MMA career. Dwayne Ludwig, again, amazing striking coach, not necessarily a massively high MMA career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we can go on and on for days. Yeah, for some reason, in jiu-jitsu, maybe we're more primitive or something. We have to have that direct connection.
Mm-hmm. I I think something was really good. I had it was one of the earlier episodes of my podcast. I had Kenny Florian on, and he was saying, understanding, and he was using MMA, but he was saying understanding the difference between an athlete, a fighter, and a martial artist.
Mm.
He's like that. There's a huge difference, and he goes, it's not, especially in striking. It's not always the martial artist wins. Some people are just their athleticism is able to overcome, their toughness. And that's when he talked about being a fighter, their
Yeah,
toughness is able to overcome. And he said, and obviously, the greats tend to be the ones that have a combination of the three.
yeah.
When you look at, you look at a GSP, that's a perfect example of somebody who, just a phenomenal athlete, a really tough guy. And then, like my coach, when he got to train with him, he said that was the thing you would always note is he trained more than anybody. And he was after classes, he was asking John Danaher, what should I do here? How am I doing? What is happening? And John had him working different things after everyone got done training. And, seeing that is, having that kind of athlete, an athlete and a martial artist difference in jujitsu. There's a difference between the two. Obviously, what the greats will generally be in competition are going to be the people that can kind of connect to the two and really have both. But
Mm.
you get to talk to some people that aren't great athletes and hear their perspective on jujitsu, and even you get to feel their perspective of jujitsu. You get to roll with them, and you can recognize, oh, this person is legitimately very
Mm.
good. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I think that that's such a it's just that it's something to keep in mind, for the people listening on it is when you are learning though, you don't go to learn from an athlete, someone who is just an athlete. That
Yeah,
is, that is going to put you in the situation where they're using terms like just do this and move here.
yeah,
And you're like,
yeah, yeah,
what? That's because they don't, they're an athlete, they're so coordinated. They don't have to understand things deeply. They can just do. I think that's
yeah. Of
something really
course.
important.
Well, yeah, the amount of times I've been around really high level jiu-jitsu athletes, and I've gone to one of their seminars, um, which as an earlier belt, you do get taken in by the celebrity. You think, oh my god, it's such and such from the YouTube or from Flow or whatever, from the ADCCs. You think, oh my god, I need to go learn from this person. And you're taken in by that celebrity, and they're just like, yeah, when I am here, I do this and I feel this, and you're like, I didn't learn anything there. And then you see something amazing, think, oh, maybe I could copy that, and you drill it a few times. Then you go on Instagram afterwards, oh, game changer. Like, how many times do you see that? Yeah, it wasn't. Like, this person didn't really say much apart from a few setups they use that they feel out, and then they do this finish. Um, and why have I wasted so much money on this? Like,
I've
but then
Go ahead. Go ahead.
you have, like I say, these amazing coaches which just get fly under the radar. Like I say, like Sean Williams. You think um, I'd probably have to explain who Sean Williams is to get him in. I had to explain who Preet was to get him in
Hmm.
initially. I'd met him at the Globetrotter camp, and I was like blown away by his coaching, and I was like, oh my god, I have to get him in the gym. But when I went back to my home gym, and it wasn't going to be cheap to get him across. We had to fly him from Estonia and pay for the whole weekend for him. Um, and to try and convince my students, oh, there's this Estonian guy that you've never heard of, but he's an incredible coach. And like, what has he done?
Hmm.
Well, he hasn't done anything because he's in his late 40s or mid to late 40s, and he's in Estonia. okay, but I'm like, but then you get him across, you're like, oh my God, this is game changing. He can explain
Mhm.
everything that we've ever done. Um, yeah, yeah, we again, this was weird obsession we have with the celebrity in jiu-jitsu, that you can pay for someone who's a really great competitor, but they have no idea what the hell they're doing. Who just go, yeah, I feel this when I pass, and then I just go through them. You're like, cool.
Mhm.
I didn't learn much then.
That is, yeah, there are like certain terms that you hear coaches say, you see it online all the time, that you should, I think, if you're a student and you're watching them, you should run from. And so, like, some of the
Yeah.
big ones are explode. You know, you're going to explode into this. This is, you have to be, anytime they talk about a physical attribute, I've went to seminars and I won't say who, but one time this guy was showing how to finish a choke. And then he said, some of the people weren't getting it. And it was because he wasn't explaining it right. And he brings everybody in and he's like, yeah, people are struggling with this. Some people are getting it, some people aren't. And he says, it's because they don't deadlift and you would get these muscles. And so you would be able to finish this choke. And so that was honestly his, his answer was, it's because you guys haven't been deadlifting. And, like you hear that stuff and it is, as a as somebody who's trying to learn, it's very discouraging because you're said, oh well, this isn't, I can't learn this from you, I just have to be bigger and stronger to do it. And so I think that's just it's a big problem with the way that jiu-jitsu is taught and consumed. And it's something that I try to be really honest with my students with. They will come in and say, hey, I was watching this person online. And I'm like, hey, dude, don't watch that guy. He sucks. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And you have to like, but you want to be honest with those, because they're like, I never, if they don't ask, I never just like bring the class around like, hey, just so you guys know, don't watch anything Josh McKinney posts on YouTube. It sucks. I don't do that. But if they ever ask, like, nah, he's not good. You shouldn't be watching this stuff.
Well, I think with if you set your students up right, then I think they have their own bullshit filter. But even then, like when you have white belts and blue belts come in and they've been learning something, um, a good gym is a good bullshit filter. Like if they go away and they learn something like daft, and they come in and try it and they get murdered for it, you think, oh well, hopefully they've learned their lesson and maybe that technique doesn't work on that coach. Um, and it's like every time you watch the mad inverted shit, I'm just like, cool, try it. I'll see you in hospital. I'll collect
Mhm.
your body afterwards. Um, yeah, I think again, it's maybe down to us to make sure that you have students that can um, objectively think.
Mhm.
Would this work? Why does this make sense? Am I going to get hurt if I try this? Will I get laughed at if I try this? Um, and I think that's down to us again. I mean, honestly, like when you were talking about deadlifts, it kind of gave me a horrible flashback to when I first started teaching. So I started teaching because there was no other option. Like it was
Mhm.
either this or close the gym. You still guess which one I took. Uh, and I had like 9 months of jiu-jitsu experience at this point. Like that was all. Um, and so I remember like teaching those initial uh, like rear naked choke classes and been like, if you want to get better at the rear naked choke, don't go do more pull-ups and you'll get stronger. Because I didn't understand
Uh-huh.
like the intricacies of what this choke was. So all I could say was, well, if you want to hurt them, get stronger at it.
Mhm.
Um, which then precludes people. And again, circles back around to, do you really understand the technique, or are you just performing something you've seen and you
Mhm.
just happen to be a great specimen that allows you to do it?
Mhm.
Like my favorite seminars have been from A, great coaches who know what the hell they're on about, but B, small people. Like I love like she's actually from AOJ. slash Gav House gym. She now lives in the UK. Her name's Chelsea. Um, Chelsea Bainbridge Donna Barlow. I'm not sure on her surname currently. I think it's Barlow because she married one of Braulio's black belts, Tom Barlow from the UK, and they've set up a gym in the UK. But she's like, I think she competed like 49 kilos, so she is a
Yeah.
small woman. And so, I don't want to learn from someone who can rip a phone book in half, because if he gets a guillotine, I'm going to assume that he's
Mm-hmm.
getting really good triangles or whatever, or arm bars, because he is a mountain. But if I can say what she does to finish a triangle, holy hell, I want to know what the hell she's doing to finish a triangle, because there's no way on earth she's using strength to do it. And sure enough, when I watched her do a triangle seminar, she showed about just moving the head slightly to the side. I was like, what magic is this? Like, you're not actually using any extra strength. You're just literally, like, people who can't see this on YouTube, turning the head like 45 degrees with your hands, and the whole choke just becomes
Mm-hmm.
awful. Like, oh, that's what I want. So how many small people can come teach jiu-jitsu, because they must have great games.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's huge, is to find and this isn't to discourage guys that aren't small, because I'm not small. I'm 100. I competed 190 pounds, and so I could make much lighter than that, but that's just what I compete at, because I don't want to deal with the dieting and stuff like that. I just like to compete what I weigh. But um I one of the biggest, this is actually a lesson that I got from Sean Williams when I was a purple belt, and he did a seminar, and he always likes to finish it with some thought process on training or something like that. I always love getting those things, but he talked about the importance of rolling without strength. And he was saying, he was explaining, the feel factor and kind of every factor of when it comes to rolling without using strength, using your timing, your technique, and your weight distribution to beat people. And so I started messing with that. And the more I did it, the more I started to understand what jujitsu actually was. So many of the things that I was doing, I was able to just do because maybe I weighed the same as my guy I was going with, but I was a little stronger. I was a little faster. And when I started to learn to not use strength, then obviously the secondary thing that happens when you learn that, especially if you're a bigger guy, this is just something that's huge to learn, is that you won't get tired. I mean, almost at all. And so then theoretically, you're able to train way, way more because you're not tired, you're not beat up, you're not muscling everything. And that is, from the bigger guy's perspective. Obviously, I'm not one of the what when I walk around that someone go, oh yeah, this guy's a big guy, but from a medium-sized guy's perspective,
Yeah.
that is something that's really to not get discouraged about when it comes to learning. You can learn technique, but you have to use no strength. You just can't. You cannot muscle. It's just going to be so much harder to learn how to, you know, actually have good and efficient jujitsu if you are muscling.
Well, it circles back around to those same conversations we keep coming back around to, is that it's separating that jujitsu and the athleticism. And you have those great coaches who try and focus you in different ways onto the core jujitsu and away from the athleticism. Like, how many times will you hear a coach say the word relax? And how many the amount of times that I've heard in different ways, so exactly what you just said, that roll without strength, or was it one of the Hiberos said, if you're breathing out your mouth when you're rolling, you've been doing it wrong, or if you've used strength, you've done it wrong. Like, we all come back around to these same ways of like trying to say that jiu-jitsu doesn't need this, like, but because of um, the marriage in our head between competitive jiu-jitsu on the highest level and the athleticism it takes, and the martial art that we're doing, we can't separate these things. And so that's why when you actually hear "don't roll with strength," relax. If you're breathing out your mouth, you're doing it wrong. If you use strength, you're doing it wrong. We can't separate them, especially when you're an earlier belt, when you're like a white or blue or purple belt. You can't get these apart, because every bit of consumption you have on it when you watch it is there together. Like, and when you're told you compete, it's like they're together again. Like, how am I supposed to compete without using my athleticism coach? Yeah, good point. So it's always like gluing these two things together, and then we spend the rest of our time trying to pull them apart when we explain it to people. Just like, no, relax, you'll understand your jiu-jitsu more. No, don't use strength, you'll understand your jiu-jitsu more. But it's like, what do you mean I have to relax and not use strength? I've been told the other 23 hours and 59 minutes of the day that I have to use strength, like, from every angle I'm coming from. And it's like, okay, good point. Like, no wonder it's a minefield, and then that it's, you know, we're giving people a cake and then telling them to like separate the eggs from the flour, like, and they're wondering why it's hard.
I think that is, man, that's a really good point. I think it's hard for people to understand something that a lot of matches that I have, even at black belt, um, I use no strength or athleticism, but I don't go into the match saying I'm not going to use strength here. I go into the match saying I'm just going to do jujitsu like I always do, and then being able to flip the switch of I'm going to need to explode here. I'm going to need to be strong here. I'm going to need to be, but relying on that is literally your very last resort.
Yeah.
That is the very last thing that you rely on, instead of this is just what I marry everything with. That is so important for people to learn. I remember the first time, because like I said, as a purple belt, I started to try to not use strength when rolling. And I started doing it in the gym. I started getting much better. And then I would go to compete and I would have this mindset that, okay, now I need to use my strength again. And I wasn't having a ton of success with it because I wasn't able to feel because I was so tense, right? And then I remember the first time I went in and said, "Okay, I'm sick of this. I'm just going to try to compete exactly at the pace that I train." And I went and I had like 3 matches that day, and I won all 3. And I remember calling my dad on the phone after, and I was like, "Hey, you know how in the gym, I don't like, I'll try to like roll without strength." And he goes, "Yeah, like I did that to 3 good brown belts and it worked. Like I was able to do jiu-jitsu." And then as I started to realize, like a lot of times it works, not always though. Sometimes you go with somebody and they're also either they're technically really good or they are uh, able to be big enough, strong enough to make you have to use your strength and athleticism. But it's just something you can't rely on. I compete at medium heavy. If I fight a guy named Hulk, do you think that me trying to be strong is going to matter? It's most likely it's just I'm going to get tired and then he's going to beat me, you know? And so, if you're going to beat those guys, you have to be able to separate your, unless you are just ridiculously gifted and you can just be strong for a 10-minute match.
It does make me quite curious because, again, seeing like relationships to other sports, and you know, the whole idea of okay, I'll come at this from a different angle. I watched like quite a lot of road cycling, you know, like Tour de France and stuff
Uh-huh.
like that. And um, the amount of times I see in sport, they try and find ways of making it like solely about the certain aspect of what's happening. So I talk about road cycling. Um, they try and make sure that there's like a weight limit on how light the bike can be. And so, you know, you then, if the bike can't be so ridiculously light and it hits a limit, it's now based on how good the cyclist is. You know, you've taken the bike out of the equation, as it
Mm-hmm.
were, because everyone's on the same bit of kit. Now we just get to see the human. And conversely, in horse racing, which is something I've very recently learned about, is this idea of uh, the jockeys have to weigh in and be the same weight. And if they're too light, they have to have weighted clothes on. So that the jockey becomes something that doesn't matter anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about the horse. just reminds me of this idea of jiu-jitsu. Like if we took out, like you say, you roll without strength and they're rolling without strength, and with the same weight, we've completely stretched out, we've pulled out all these different variables of physicality and everything. Now it's just who has the better jiu-jitsu here? Is it me or you?
Mhm.
It's not, oh, you've got worse jiu-jitsu, but you're stronger. We always try and find that way in jiu-jitsu. That's why we have belts, and that's why we have weight categories and stuff, is because we're trying to find, when we strip everything else away, who had the better jiu-jitsu at this moment in time when all other variables are taken care of. And so it kind of makes sense in a sport aspect, is that's how we've made it as fair as we have. Just like every other sport, we always try and find what is, the thing we're trying to measure here. It's always about measurement. And we're, in jiu-jitsu, we try and do our best to measure the better jiu-jitsu. Be
Mhm.
it you have two insane specimens going at each other, which the specimen part cancels out, and now we just have jiu-jitsu going through it. Or we have two guys who are hobbyists, who are like, or masters or whatever. I'm not using strength, and neither are you. Let's see who has the better jiu-jitsu. And I don't know, it's quite heartwarming, I guess. I think my overall takeaway from that is that, just like other sports have done this, we try and do the same.
Mhm.
And so it's understanding where you fit in that. It's like, are you going to be one of those specimens, or are you going to be a non-athletic roller? But it always comes back to that same thing. It's like the thing we're measuring is your jiu-jitsu. So what should you be working on?
Yeah, that is exactly, man, that's so important too, is that something I always tell my students is, hey, I'm just here to teach you jujitsu. Like that's it.
Yeah,
It's not anything else. It's not and that's why you're here, is you're here to get better. Obviously, some people come to the gym for different reasons, to lose weight or to do whatever, right? But the idea is the same. When we're on the mat, all of our goal is to just get better at jujitsu. It's not to beat the guy that we train with. It's not to, it's just to get better, and so you have to think, I think, just if you were somebody who's listening to this that maybe we would call a beginner, somebody who's a white or a blue belt. And I think it's important to remember, hey, uh, you need to focus on getting better, not on winning. And and it's tough, is, people worry about, I want to win this white belt tournament or whatever. And that's fun. But you don't go in with the mindset of, I am trying to win this tournament. You go into the mindset is, I'm trying to get good at jujitsu so I can win this tournament. Because then what happens is you're focused on, I need to make the lightest weight class that I can, and and your focus starts to get away from jujitsu. I need to be stronger at this weight class. I need to do this, and just everything that you do, your focus starts to pull away from jujitsu, and it's just so
mm.
important to keep that as your primary focus. And how can I get good? How can I get better at jujitsu?
That's pretty much what our goal is. Again, like it's all concept, technique, or whatever. Is And this whole idea of relax, like you said, like teaching someone to roll without um, strength. Uh, Pretty much as soon as someone gets in the door, is to try and like remove that, because everyone comes in, they think, oh, I have to use as much strength as possible. That's why you have white belt strength, or whatever colloquial term you have. Like, what was that?
Mhm.
I've heard some terrible ones in the past to describe white belts. Uh, but yeah, they're all strength and no technique. So it's our job as coaches to, as fast as possible, like swing it the other way, and um, pull them away from athleticism, using our athleticism to make sure they use more jujitsu, because even competitively or non-competitively, that's all that's ever measured. Like it's um, but when you consume jujitsu, and you see the high level competitors, and that's all that's kind of shown, it is that kind of, you're given this picture of, oh no, strength obviously matters because look at that guy with the ripped muscles. But it doesn't. Like if you just come in looking at that, when he's got the strained face and he's got his veins popping out of his head and he's got a ripped chest and all this kind of stuff, it's like, oh wow, I have to be strong to be good at jiu-jitsu. No, you you've put the two things together again. Like, no, our job is to pull them apart. And like, no, ignore your strength, ignore, the whole I suck at jiu-jitsu less part of this if you're a beginner. Yeah, like everything you're ever going to do in jiu-jitsu is removing the variables of strength, athleticism, and size, and age, and everything else. It's about how good you are at jiu-jitsu. And so if you're not focusing on that solely, you're missing what this has always been about. And then it comes down to, what are you getting out of your coach? Are they trying to just make sure you're solely good at jiu-jitsu, or are they just saying to you, oh, I'd explode here, oh, I'd use this, because then you're not getting good at jiu-jitsu.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's really, and maybe your goal is just to compete. But I guarantee you, even if your goal is just to be a competitor, there will be a day that you wish you had better understanding because you want to, you get to a point where you can't compete anymore. You get old, you get injured, and you still want to, you don't want all the time that you spent training to just be over and say, well, now there's nothing else I can do with jujitsu because all I focused on was competing. You're most likely going to want to teach, even if it's not running a school or something, even if it's just being a coach in a class. You're going to want to do that. And when that happens, you want to have had a good understanding. You want to have a good understanding of jujitsu.
If you were to put around, like, what's one of the main things that people want out of the sport is to be a black belt. If you say to any white belt, what do you want? Black belt. Okay. What does that mean? A black belt's someone who's going to be here for life. Age, ability, age, and uh, uh, physical health be damned. We're going to be here forever.
Mhm.
And so at some point you have to have a love for what this all means. You have to have like a true fascination with, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Because otherwise you're just going to get bored. You can't just repeat the same things day in, day out for the next 60 years or 10 years or 5 years or whatever. You'll never get to black belt if all you're interested in is rote repetition of the same things day in, day out. You're going to hit a finite amount. But if you've got a genuine curiosity of this, no matter what your body says, you're going to be in this forever. You're going to get that black belt regardless. Um, so it's a kind of change of mindset of, this isn't just about competition. I couldn't give a shit if I never competed again, but I'm going to be doing this to day I die. Like,
Mhm.
I care about understanding this, and that's what keeps me here. So every day I come on and I talk to people like yourself, or talk to anyone jiu-jitsu, white belt and up. I just get more and more curious about this. I have the strangest question from a white belt. I'm like, right, I wonder what that does mean.
Mhm.
And I love this even more. And that's why I'm still here 12 years later. But before you have is, I want to be good in competition. And, the second you hit 30, you kind of past it for competing. Most people are anyway. If you're not in the right town, that, in a big enough gym, you're not in the right place for competing either. So,
Mhm.
um, especially if you hit, like, you start at 25, like by the time you hit 30, your knees hurt. Like, competition is going to be the last thing you want to do, and you're definitely going to leave jiu-jitsu at that point. But if you have a genuine curiosity for this, you'll stick around forever.
Mhm. I think that's good. I think, all right, I'm almost out of time. I got to go
Yeah,
teach in just a little bit, but
I was looking at my watch and I was thinking, yeah, I'm pretty sure he has to go teach in a minute.
yeah, and I do, but I think we should finish with, if we're gonna do this once a month, what are we gonna call it?
I don't know. We have to have like some sort of like joint podcast name. I don't know. We'll
Right?
figure it out. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
But
that's because
definitely,
that.
once a month, this kind of works. I enjoy these chats with
Me too,
yourself.
man. These are,
I can't
yeah,
wait to
they're
do it
much
in
more
purpose.
relaxed,
I can't
huh?
wait to do it in person, like do it around a table properly, and
I
like
know,
actually like
man. That'll
show
be fun.
techniques. That'd be great.
That will be
Oh man, I'm
fun.
looking forward to that.
That will be. Do you kind of have a thought of when you'll be in the states
Um,
yet, or still not sure?
hopefully late June, July, but they've
All
just
right.
made it illegal to leave the country up until around about May. So I'm just like, just whatever with this country right now. But I am always abreast of everything. So the second I know anything, I'm booked and I'm out of here. So as soon as I know, it'll be released to everywhere.
Awesome. And so if people wanted to just if somebody that's listening through my show, if people wanted to keep up with your seminar tour, how would they do it? What would be the easiest way?
Um, through just like type Chris Payne's BJJ into Facebook, and you'll find me, and everything gets posted on there. So,
All right.
but I'm sure we'll, especially like with your little trip over to Europe, hopefully later in the year. Hopefully, I can advertise your visit just as much.
For sure.
Oh, I'm excited for this year, dude. This has been so much fun.
I know it has been good. All right. Thank you. Thank you for chatting, man. This is always fun.
Always. Yeah. Try and stir up more hornets nests on your Instagram, because you seem to be really good at that.
I will. Yeah, I think yeah, I'll go after somebody next. I don't know, or something next, and we'll see.
Yeah,
I'll go with something like self-defense doesn't work or something like that. Or I'll go with I always comment.
What's more important, defense or offense? That'd be a good one.
Yeah, I always position before submission or submission before position. That'll be good.
Honestly, I've just done a white belt toolbox, like 8 episodes thing, and position submissions, like one of the ones I did, I think it was, or I might have done a separate episode. But yeah, please, let's do that one. Like in like 2 or 3 weeks time, I want to do that episode. So position submission, let's do that one.
Let's do it.
Great fun with that one.
Okay. I like that. That'll be fun. I have or the thing I always comment on I always comment something on my students' posts anytime they take a picture in their doing in no-gi class or something like that. I always comment under it and say no-gi doesn't work in the streets. And that is so that maybe I'll go really aggressive with that one. Tell people like no-gi isn't good for self-defense, because when would you ever be fighting somebody wearing a rash guard or something like that? I really stir it up.
I love every time I wake up in the morning I see Instagram, because obviously I'm usually when you're most prolific, I'm going to sleep. So when I wake up and see the what you've done, I'm just like, oh my god, he's done it again. And then like everything that comes through, I'm just like, he's amazing at this.
That's awesome.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, do something more fun every day.
I'll think of something.
Awesome. Thanks for setting this up, Josh. It's been
thank you, man.